Hello, everyone, and welcome to our lovely podcast, Let's Play It by Ear, featuring me, Joanna, and with my co-host, Carrie. Today, we will be talking about communication. So, just going to hand it right off to you, Carrie. What are we going to talk about today?
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Joanna. So, in the last episode, we covered why we were away for about a half a year and what happened. So, today, in this episode, second episode of Opus 2, we're going to ask the very important question of why we have to communicate and talk
Yes.
to each other. So, to get that going, Joanna, I have a question for you. You did say that you and John went through topical steroid withdrawal before, but you weren't
Right.
aware of it. And you had done something a little bit different before compared to what you did this time. So this time you decided to actually tell people more of what was happening. Can I ask why?
So,
What was the driving
the
force
last
behind that?
time this happened to us, I hardly told anyone. I think I told you because I know that you were aware that there were skin problems and that we took him to so many doctors that time. We took
Yeah.
him he took himself to a dermatologist. That was a fat failure. We ended up going to Chinese doctors who also had no idea what to do with
Right.
him before we finally found this naturopathic doctor that really cared for him. And, I mean, from the outset, it looked like she only prescribed literal supplements and vitamins and probiotics and stuff like that. But it really helped. It really helped rebuild him from the inside out. But I didn't tell really anyone else. I did not tell my students. I did not tell my streams, like my YouTube audience. I don't think I was streaming at that point. But I didn't tell my YouTube audience. I think I made offhand comments in my YouTube videos where I would mention things like, oh, we're having some problems with John's skin, blah, blah, blah. Right. But I would never go into detail about it. I would never tell people what was happening because I think at that point I was trying to kind of protect that relationship. He was my new boyfriend. I had this irrational fear that people would tell me to dump him because he's a new boyfriend, he's a new relationship, and I was scared that people would see our relationship and be like, Joanna, all he's doing is causing you grief and pain, just get rid of him. But I was way too in love with him to let that happen, even though now I realize it's completely irrational. Because the people who did know, no one mentioned anything about, like me dumping him or anything like that. Like our church knew about this situation too. They were praying for us and trying to help care for us and stuff like that too. But, so I had this irrational fear of people telling me to dump him. And, and so I just kept it all inside. I look back now and I'm like, one, if I was on the outside and I saw this happening, telling the caretaker to dump their partner would be the last thing on my mind. Like I would just be like, yo, let me know, like, can I take you out just for a breather, or can I make you some food so you guys don't have to make some food?
Yeah.
You both can rest, you know, like after you're done eating,
Mm-hmm.
just give me the dirty dishes and I'll do the dishes for like that's the type of thing that I would think of doing now. But back then I was so protective of our relationship that I just didn't say anything. And I had all this irrational fear about what people would tell me if I told them the truth of just how hard everything was that we were going through. Like I went with him to every single one of his doctor's visits. And like I was basically his wife from the beginning, and then I did not get to really date him for fun until like a year and a half to 2 years into us dating. A lot of people were actually telling us to just get married already by like, yeah, right. By the first or second year of our dating, people were telling us to just get married already. But we're like, we feel like we haven't been able to have fun dating yet, you know? So we spent another, I think it was like 2 years just dating and having fun and living a carefree life, you know? And then it was another year of engagement after that before we got married. So, I guess I was trying to keep this relationship so sacred that I just didn't tell anyone what was going on. But of course that meant that I would show up to lessons like super tired. Whenever I would have to reschedule something, I couldn't really say exactly why, which some people would probably read as kind of shady, you know, and shifty. And people would completely, you know, misunderstand why I might be so flaky sometimes. Whereas this time around, I was like, what's the point of people guessing? I should just tell people what's happening just so people don't freaking guess. Because I think what happened the most in the first time around that this happened was that a lot of people were guessing as to what was happening. Because sometimes I would mention offhand that like, oh, my boyfriend has like some skin problems. I've mentioned it offhand in some videos, like, and I don't even mention it in most videos, like just some of the vloggy ones, I'll mention offhand that we're doing some diet thing for John's skin. But people pick up on it, man. Like some of my students who used to just watch my stuff, they would talk to me in person, well, as in person as online can get, but they would talk to me in our lessons and be like, oh, by the way, I remember you mentioning this in a video about your boyfriend, your partner's skin thing, and like, have you tried this, right? And I was always really surprised that they remembered, but what I ended up having to do was always kind of backtracking and telling them what actually happened, you know, because what ended up happening was that a lot of people had this idea that John had some skin problems, but no one knew how severe it was. So it was like, there's actually really nothing. And we've proven this with this diagnosis now. There is literally nothing that anyone can really truly like tell us to do something that would make him better, right? Literally the cure is to just not be on steroids for long enough and wait it out, right? Which is 100% not what anyone wants to hear. And it's also not something that people want to tell others, right? We live in a society where we just want that quick fix. That's why steroids are a thing. Now, steroids, by the way, I just want to make it clear to everyone that steroids absolutely are important to saving people's lives, right? There are many situations where you do have to use steroids in a medical situation where that is the only thing that will stabilize the person, right? In that case, 100% shoot those steroids in them, keep them alive, okay? But like in John's situation, it's his skin. It's not life or death, you know. There is really no
Mm-hmm.
reason to be on steroids for so long. So anyway, that aside, I did find that I had to do a lot of explaining after the fact. And I was like, well, wouldn't it just be easier if this time around I just told people from the start that something
Yep.
bad is happening? I don't know the conclusion of this, but just so you know, we've done this before and I know how much work it takes to get through this. So
Mm-hmm.
I ended up restricting my teaching hours to a later start time so that if I slept really late, I would still have about 5 to 6 hours of sleep before I rolled out of bed and came downstairs and started teaching. And there were many
Mm-hmm.
nights that we wouldn't sleep till like 4. And so I would sleep from 4 to 10, roll out of bed, put on some
Mm-hmm.
clothes so I would look presentable, run downstairs, turn on my computer, and start teaching within 15 minutes. Because my first teaching slot
Wow.
is 10:15 a.m. So at
Okay.
the very least, I could still sleep like 6 hours. That's not bad. That's not bad. You
Yeah.
know, like 6 hours is
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's as bad as 5 hours. Sometimes it was like we couldn't get to sleep till 5. You know, you do
Yeah.
what you can, right? Because it's like if I had
Mm-hmm.
9 o'clock students, which was my previous start time was 9 o'clock, I would miss all of them, and then all of those would have to be
Yeah.
rescheduled. Some people would probably
Mm-hmm.
end up dropping lessons because I'm so flaky, right? I think it was just
Mm-hmm.
altogether better to just stop teaching at 9.
It would be the more, or it is, I think, the more responsible solution
So
and
yeah, like
reasonable
it's
solution too.
actually ironically what allowed me to keep working was restricted hours, which of
Mm-hmm.
course meant that I did not earn as much as the year before. Last week I had to do some income calculations for 2021, and I took a huge hit.
Mm.
I took a huge financial hit. But I realized that I earned more than if I kept trying to go full speed. Like if I kept trying to
Mm-hmm.
go full speed, I think I would have absolutely crashed and burned. And I would have earned
Yeah.
even less than what I ended up earning. So,
Yeah.
like I know that I made the right choice, and I know that I made the right choice to support my husband. Family is 1st,
Mm-hmm.
after all, right?
Yeah.
I know that I struck that balance well, and I'm really dang proud of myself for that. But let me tell you, seeing the
As you should.
numbers so much lower than the year before hurts. It hurts.
It does. I mean, it's a sad
It
fact of
is.
life.
But I know that I made the right choice, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm still dealing with the feelings surrounding that. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but seriously though, I would say that one of the things that made this time go a lot easier was literally just that people knew that I was going through a rough time.
Mm-hmm.
I am probably the world's most spoiled teacher because after I sent out an email to all of my students telling everyone what's happening, especially after I got the diagnosis of topical steroid withdrawal, just sent out a mass email to my students and was like, this is what's happening, 99% sure this is the diagnosis. And then after that, like every lesson at the beginning, my students are like, you doing okay? Are you okay? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And to have that kind of understanding at every single time slot that you have a meeting with someone is so comforting. I feel like I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to hide. I don't have to hide that I look tired. I don't have to be on, you know?
Did you feel freer compared to the first time you had to
Oh
you
yeah,
had to deal with it.
so much freer. Like I felt, I don't know how to say it, but like I just felt so like unrestrained, if that makes sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not that
Mm-hmm.
I'm like liberated, but it just, I didn't feel tied down by
Yeah.
expectations to act a certain way.
And I think also like having to just keep it to yourself, that's added pressure that adds an extra layer of stress onto the situation that you're already dealing with. And with both of those, I would just compound the
It definitely
negative
makes you
aspects
feel
of it,
more
if I
alone
can put
if you
it that
keep it
way.
to yourself. Because, like, one of the greatest side
Yeah.
effects of just telling people about this was that, one, there are quite a few people who are like, wait a second, that sounds like what I had some years ago. And then, so they tell me
Yeah.
about their experience, and they're like, wow, now that you mention it, I totally had this years ago. I just didn't know what it was. So I had a few students who were like, I've totally had this. I have a few people in my stream who are like, I definitely had topical steroid withdrawal. Some people were even diagnosed. So some
Mm-hmm.
people already had it, but why would you ever talk about it? Right. But as
Yeah.
it,
The
exactly,
occasion does not
some
arise.
people learned more about the dangers of essentially abusing topical steroids, right?
Mm.
Because there was one person in my stream who was like, thank you for telling me, because I had no idea why the doctors here in Europe, because they're in Europe, she mentioned that the doctors in Europe treat prescribing topical steroids almost like a death sentence. They're so reluctant to do it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And yet they're handed out like candy here in North America. You know, and
Different places, different practices,
we'll leave that for another
perhaps.
conversation. But yeah, people learned more about it. Uh, people.
Mm-hmm.
So there was one person who was like, I am 100% sure my brother had this years ago. They were like, it's the only time I've ever seen him sob, from the pain and the suffering. I'm like,
Oh.
yeah, sobbing sounds about right. Yeah. Did he
Mm-hmm.
also like devolve into panic attacks? Oh yeah, yeah, that's totally part of it too, Like, you're literally watching your
Yeah.
skin break, and you have no, and
Mm-hmm.
itch, and sting, and just everything 24/7. Like, how would you not go
Mm-hmm.
insane?
There's
There's
no
no
reprieve.
reprieve. Like,
Yeah.
how do you not go insane? I don't know how you not go insane, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, people learned about it. People were more understanding of me, of themselves, of their relatives, of their
Mm-hmm.
friends. Suddenly, a lot of people are in it together, and you're not alone anymore. Like, that was the greatest side effect of just repeating talking about it, was that one, it makes you feel not alone. Two, the more you repeat the same story, as hard as it is, it actually helped me kind of articulate what was going on better and better and better. And it's such a
Yeah.
release. It's such a release to be able to in a very articulate way talk about what happened to you and what happened
Mm-hmm.
to your partner, and really talk about it like, this is what happened. There's something very empowering about that, where you
Mm-hmm.
it's something about taking control of your narrative. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't feel as controlled by unseen forces. You feel a lot more like,
Mm-hmm.
no, this happened to me, and yet this is my response, and I have control over my response.
Yeah.
You don't feel so just like locked down by like, the world crashing down around you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is something empowering about that. And as painful as it was to keep repeating the story, I am so glad I did, because I honestly think that that was one of the ways I kept it together. Granted, yes, different people will react differently. So something to keep in mind for anyone who is doing this is you also have to keep in mind the receiver of this information, right? Some people are very experienced and they'll know exactly what to say. Some people are not experienced, and you kind of need to take what they say with a grain of salt, right? If they try to give you a remedy immediately, just know that they're doing that because they would love to fix your situation immediately, right? And you want to take the love part of it, right? And you can sort of disregard the rest, you know, but you take the love part of it and you treasure that, right? They would only tell you these things because they love you, right? They're really not trying to make your life harder, you know, even though their words are, okay? Yes, it's true. It's annoying when people try to just give you remedies, right? But I've truly learned to take the intent and take that to heart and be like, this person loves me and, you know, really cares about me in order to want to say something like that, right? And still others are just wired differently. So some people will be like, you know, I don't actually need all of this information, but thanks for letting me be aware, right? And you also have to take that with a grain of salt too and be like, oh, okay, well, they're not as emotionally invested. And that's totally fine, right? Some people are just wired differently, right? And it's totally okay for people to not be emotionally invested in you and what's happening to you. But at the same time, it is a lot better for them to know that you are freaking tired, right? So they cut you some slack, right? Because if they're not that emotionally invested in you, at the very least, if they know why you're so tired, they totally cut you more slack. I've noticed this in like a few people that I work with are definitely wired differently than I am, right? They're just not as emotionally invested in my life or anything. And that's fine, right? But I totally noticed like just them knowing that I'm tired because like I'm not sleeping, you know, like just them knowing that they're like a lot more understanding, you know, it's open communication, right? Like that's what you need, right? Like,
that's why we talk to each other.
Exactly.
Bottom line, I mean, yes, we are a music podcast, and I mean, in a way, wanting to tie it back to what we do, it's just like with students, in a sort of similar situation, sort of quite different. I mean, for me personally, if my students weren't able to practice that week and they came to lesson kind of underprepared, I'd like to know. And I tell them, I'm not going to bite you or I'm not going to yell at you if you didn't practice. I just want to know. I want to know why you're playing like that. And I also want to know if you're comfortable sharing why you weren't able to practice.
I would like to know if their like loved one was in the hospital or something and they're just like emotionally not present, you know?
Because we're humans first. And if you help each other understand the reason why, I think we can possibly avoid a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding as well too, and hurt feelings.
I mean, how can you not just subconsciously cut someone some slack if you knew that they were going through a tough time?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The moment you know that someone's going through a tough time, you can't not cut them some slack. You know? Like at least I find as a teacher, like this is why I always ask my students, how are you doing? You doing okay? What's going on? Right? Like that's the first thing I ask is what's going on? And, you know, based on their response to me, I can kind of gauge like how intense should we take this lesson? Right? There are totally some students where it's like, you can tell they're like, yeah, let's do this, right? You know, Yeah. And so, like,
Cool.
for those, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're having a really intense lesson today, right? But others, you can kind of tell
Yep.
when they're not really there, you know? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it does help to know why.
It does. It really does. It changes the tone of the relationship, I think, to one that's more
Yeah,
cautious to begin with, maybe when the person you're dealing with might want to keep their distance because of something that's happening in their lives, to one that where they feel a
that's
bit
true.
more embraced. Feel it's a safer environment and they can open up if they so
Yeah,
choose to do so.
yeah. Which, like, I realized now that was basically me on the other side, like, years ago, you know? I was cautious with
Hmm.
everyone.
Yeah. Hold it at arm's length.
I don't think that was healthy for me, though.
Mm. No, we learn
Yeah.
and we grow
So, I mean, I guess that's right.
as we
Like,
know.
I guess that's one reason why I do ask my students how they're doing, is because, like, I kind of want them
Hmm.
to know that it's healthier just to say it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
completely
I
agree.
think some people, um, I'm sure you've heard this, but, like, a lot of people say, like, oh, teachers are not, like, music teachers are not hired
Hmm.
to care for your emotions or to care for
Mm.
your, heck, even your well-being. you know Music teachers are not hired to tell you how the world works or how business works or whatever, right? But
Hmm.
I don't know, I can't bring myself to be that. Like, it's so inhumane, in my opinion. In my opinion. um
Hmm.
I need to make that very clear. If you're going to flame me for having this opinion, you are welcome to do that. But don't flame anyone else, okay? But I can't bring myself to not, I guess, bring the humanity part of being a musician
Hmm.
into the lesson, because, like, there are just some things about music that you cannot express if you have not experienced something, you know there's a right,
Yes,
there's
I
a level
have
of
heard
emotion, right?
and been told that.
Exactly, there's a level of emotion
Hmm.
that you cannot achieve until you have experienced and processed pain. And so, as a teacher, would you not have to kind of talk about that pain?
Yeah, I mean, I will say personally, I am in the
Okay.
same boat as you. Um, Also because of my training as an ECE teacher, that side of me is, I think, magnified a little bit in terms, especially when I uh, teach
Right.
younger
Early
children as
childhood
well too.
education, right?
But
ECE. Yeah.
yes,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
ECE. Thank you. Um, just because that approach of communicating is
That's
different
true.
than with slightly
Right.
older children. But I still want to keep it there. But I
Mm-hmm.
digress. I mean, there are pedagogical differences between
Right.
different teachers, and I think our approach is one where we want to incorporate more humanities,
Mm-hmm.
emotions, and just
Right.
awareness of your
Right.
whole self. Not saying that other
Right.
approaches don't work, it's just that's
Yeah.
my preference.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing, sounds like your
I
way
think
as well
both
too.
of us, like, I would say that probably the two of us have gone through enough crap in our lives that we can't not bring in that side, you know? We've both been through a lot.
I think it comes with
Yeah.
age.
But, like, even
in
with
many ways
age,
we
though, if you haven't gone through some crap in your life, you know, because
Mhm.
call it a blessing or a curse, right? Sometimes if you have not had a lot of troubles in your life, there are just some things you can't understand,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe that.
So it's hard to, it's literally difficult for me to only talk about music in lessons.
Mhm.
I find
Yeah.
it very difficult.
And
Like, I can't not bring in the human side of things.
it's I mean, music exists because it's a part of our
Mm-hmm.
lives. It's not a standalone entity that can exist without
That's
life,
how I see it
I
too.
think.
Like,
So naturally, we would incorporate life
right?
in
Like,
music.
I see it as, it's the same reason why I tell my students that if they start to feel sick at all, just don't play the flute. Just don't
Mhm.
even play. Like, focus on recovering. I don't care if that means it's
Mhm.
only 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months. I don't care, right? Just
Mhm.
don't play the flute, right? I always tell them, one, the flute will always
Yeah.
will be waiting for you. There's no rush to get back into
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
But the second thing I tell them is that the flute is replaceable. You are not. You know,
Yeah.
you're the only
Mhm.
you that exists,
Mhm.
and you are not expendable. You need to take care of
Yep.
yourself, right? It's that.
Mhm.
So, like, in my mind, when you're talking about music, who are you really talking about? You're talking about them, right? You're talking about them,
Mhm.
and you're talking about yourself. Those are the two people you're talking about. Because
Mhm.
how can I express this emotion in this music? I need to tell them a story of something that I went through for it to be relatable,
Yeah.
right? And then they share a story
Mhm.
about something similar, because that's what we do as humans, right? It's like I say something, they're like, oh yeah, that reminds me
Yeah.
of blah blah blah, and then they talk about their own lives, right?
Yep.
I that's the, I can't do it no other way. You know?
No. No, you cannot. Don't know
Right?
what that was. But yeah. I mean, bottom line, music is
There
communication.
you go. I mean, the communication's got to be open if you want the music to work then. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to reach a wide audience and you need to be able to
Yeah.
connect with them in some way. And that stems from being able to connect with
Yeah.
others in your own life first, I would
You're right.
think.
Cuz like if you're so cautious,
And,
right? And you hold everyone at
mm-hmm.
arm's length. Like how are you ever going to break down that wall if you perform, right?
Yeah.
Like, because like the magic of a performance is when that music just kind of touches that part of you, right? You feel like it's
Yes.
speaking to you. You feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
like really getting into a part of your brain and your heart that nothing else can really reach, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
it has to mean that the person doing the performing part of it on the sending side of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, they have to be open enough and vulnerable enough to let that happen. It's like good acting, right? Bad acting is when
Yep.
like you can tell that the actor's kind of standoffish and kind of like not,
Mm-hmm.
their guard is completely up, you know? The best
Right.
acting are the ones where their guard is completely down, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing. Again, it's that kind of like, how are you communicating? Are you communicating in a closed manner or in an open manner? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
So I don't know. Does that make us weird music teachers?
Don't know, but I do know we are exploring more of that in another
Perfect.
episode. So I think this is a good place for us to cap off this
With a
second episode.
cliffhanger.
So,
Yes.
yeah, we're teasing for future
Please
episodes,
stay
so please
tuned,
stay
guys.
tuned.
All right. So I believe you are the one doing the outro. Do you
Yes,
remember the outro this time?
Let me try. Let me try. So thank you so much for tuning in, for watching, and for listening to our second episode here, talking about communication. If you're interested in finding more about what we do have a website. You can visit it here, letsplayitbyear.com.
Yeah.
And you can also find us on our social media channels. We have Facebook,
Let's Play It by Ear podcast.
Twitter,
Let_ear.
Instagram.
Let's Play It by Ear podcast.
And we can also be heard on anchor.fm.
Anchor.fm, that is. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
anchor.fm.
Let's Play It by Ear podcast.
Sorry about that. Yes, Let's Play It by Ear podcast. And also, if you want to reach out to us, please feel free to send us an email at our email address, letsplayitbyear.podcast@gmail.com.
Perfecto. Yes, like if you guys have like questions and stuff like that, it can really help kind of guide us into like different directions that we can go in. So you nailed it.
And we would very much love to hear
You
from you.
nailed it, Carrie. I forgot the email last week.
That's okay. So we will remember it.
All right. Well, by the way, guys, I'm going to mention
Until
it again
next
this
time.
week, but please engage with us on the social media because Carrie is actually good at that. Unlike
I
me
will try.
on my Just Another Flutist stuff. So please, you can actually engage and ask questions, and Carrie will actually respond. I'll drop in every now and then. If I'm being completely honest, I am so bad at the social media stuff, but Carrie is really good. So if you want to engage with us, talk with us on the social media, it will actually happen. So please engage with us on the social media. So all the links as were provided, and in the description of wherever it is that you're listening to this, it will show up in the description. So perfect.
They will be there.
I think that's it.
Okay. Until next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
See you.